It was like an out-of-body experience. I tried to turn him over and I was scared of what I was going to see.
He was found located in a pool of blood. He'd suffered a horrendous amount of injuries throughout his body.
This sort of thing doesn't happen in our little village, you know. Everybody can't believe it had happened, a murder in our village. No.
It takes a man who has a lot of hatred in them to do that to him.
He was very cunning, very cunning. He'd always tell you half the story.
It was an act of deceit. It was clear that this was a murder that had been motivated by greed.
On the western fringes of Shropshire lies the tiny village of Halfway House.
Shropshire's a massive county, very rural, and Halfway House is a typical Shropshire hamlet of around 900 people.
It's a really peaceful place. So, I mean, I open my front door and it's just the only thing I'll see is cows. Yeah, I love it.
Halfway House, it's a very cute village. It's very calm, tranquil. A lot of the people around there they know each other. They know everyone's business, quite frankly. It's a cute place to be.
Everyone's really good to each other. Everyone does look out for each other. The best way to describe it would probably what you'd see on Postman Pat when you were growing up, when he was around delivering his mail, and it's a real village, close-knit community.
It's a popular pit stop for holidaymakers travelling to the Welsh coast. And here you find Tony's Diner, owned and run by 67-year-old Satnam Singh Blugher.
Everyone really called him Mr. B. We all had difficulty pronouncing the second name, and he was well liked. Larger than life, I would say.
You'd walk in the cafe or in the takeaway, and the first thing, big smile on his face and a massive handshake. He used to greet everybody who come in there.
But becoming the diner's owner wasn't an easy journey for Satnam Singh Blugher.
Originally a taxi driver in Delhi, wanted to create a better life for himself. When he'd come over, he started working in the hotels and restaurants. My dad always had this dream. He wanted a fish and chip shop business of his own. I remember when we pulled up at the diner, this huge 96-seater restaurant, his eyes lit up and he knew this was the one that he was looking for. As his son, I was the center of his universe, but I know for a fact he loved that diner just that little bit more than any of us, from put his heart and soul into it.
After 14 years of hard graft, it's a thriving business.
He worked at 7 in the morning till 10, 11 at night. We had a 20-foot menu. We did everything from fish and chips to sirloin steak to curries to roast dinners to pizzas. The menu was absolutely huge. You used to watch him making the pizzas and he was such a show-off. He would get the dough and he'd throw it up into the air and he'd catch it and flip it round. I think some of the people just used to come to watch the show of him flipping the pizza. I think everyone just treated it like the hub of the community, and they'd get to meet each other.
But life at the diner and in the village will never be the same.
Monday the 26th of June was a typical summer's day. It was the one day in the week that the diner was closed. And on that day, a delivery driver arrived. And the idea was that he would provide all of the stuff that they needed for the week ahead. When he turned up, he couldn't get a response.
Goes next door to the post office, to ask if there's a key available for him to go into the diner to drop the delivery off. The postmistress there doesn't have a key, so she then therefore attempts to make contact with Harry.
I remember my wife calling me around 3:15 and saying, "Dad's car's here. The windows are all open, but there's no sign of Dad."
Monday is Mr. B's one day off, but he should be at home above the diner. So his son rushes back.
Come home, put my key in the door, walk straight up the stairs, right down to his bedroom, and I'm banging on the door, and he's not answering, and and I keep banging on the door, and time passes on, and there's still no answer.
Harry makes his way downstairs into the main diner.
Got a swing door into the kitchen, and instantly I can see, in my mind, what is just a spillage of some sort. I push the door open, and it's dark in the kitchen, and I could just see this spillage, and it's going across the ground. What I initially thought was just a spillage was a streak of blood. And then I hit the switch of the kitchen lights, and I see my dad face down. And I just remember screaming out and calling out to him. I don't know why. I think I already knew then that I wasn't expecting a response, and I went over to him and tried to turn him over. He had these just two big circles around his eyes and some injuries to the side of his face. I could see some stab wounds in his back, but I just remember touching him, putting my hand on his back, and just feeling absolutely cold.
In a panic, Harry dials 999.
And I remember ringing them and just telling them to get there quick. And they said, "Look, we want you to try and resuscitate him." I could see that there was no sign of life, and the operator kept screaming on the phone, "You have to turn him over, you have to turn him over, give him CPR." And I just kept saying to her, I can't do it, because I'd seen the injuries when I tried to turn him over, and I was scared of what I was going to see.
So Harry summons help from a neighbour next door.
She comes through the door, and I remember her first words just were like, "Oh God," and she took the phone from me and eventually saying to the operator, "Look, there's no point. To which the operator finally gave up.
West Mercia police and paramedics race straight to the diner.
Ambulance contact police to say that they are en route to a male that's been described as being assaulted and has suffered a lot of blood loss. Uniform officers initially respond to it, and upon their attendance they speak with the paramedics, and they establish that Satnam is unfortunately deceased. Once they're satisfied that there's nobody else in the premises, they then secure it for later examination by scene of crime officers and detectives.
DCI Mark Bellamy is the senior investigating officer on call. Soon he arrives on the scene.
Satnam was found located in a pool of blood. It was obvious that he'd suffered a horrendous amount of injuries throughout his body, causing significant blood loss. The offender, in an attempt to hide his body, had then dragged him from the initial point of where the assault had taken place to a point in the kitchen where he couldn't be easily located. Obviously at this time, Harry is extremely upset. It's clear that Satnam has been dead for a number of hours, and performing CPR was was a pointless exercise.
It's like an out-of-body experience. It's like a dream or a nightmare or something. I think not until the point where the paramedics come and the police arrive and I sit down and eventually take a glass of water just to drink. And I remember having this burning feeling in my stomach. I just felt sick and still can't comprehend what's actually unfolded in front of you.
The police now launch a murder investigation.
The first thing the police would have been thinking was, is this a robbery motive, or is there some other reason behind it?
There were a few things that were causing me a little bit of concern. The fact that the upstairs window was wide open. Was this a burglary that had gone wrong? Or was it something as simple as something closer to home?
They'd want to know who was working there. They'd want to figure out who the witnesses might be, who had come, who had gone. So they asked lots of questions, including, who were the employees and where were they now?
Soon it becomes apparent that 2 members of Mr. B's live-in staff are mysteriously missing.
I've got to build up a picture around what have they done, where are they? Is it an innocence, absence, or is there something more sinister to it?
I was driving home from work and I've never seen so many police cars. There must have been 12 or 13 of them. A couple of ambulances there, all the lights still going. I thought, God, what's happened, you know? Phoned Mr. B up. This was on the Monday, because I'd go for a pint with him on a Monday night. I was supposed to meet him for a drink.
Mark keeps on trying, but his friend isn't picking up.
I went up the pub at the halfway house just to talk to a few locals to see if anybody knew anything, because I was a bit worried actually, you know, and nobody knew anything. Maybe at about an hour later, a couple of his relatives come up and they had actually asked for me. I said, what's happening? And I said, what's happened to Mr. B? And then he said to me, Mr. B is deceased. I nearly fell over. I must have turned a whiter shade of pale, you know, and because then I couldn't speak for a bit. I thought, I went outside, I thought, I can't believe this, you know.
Then people started talking and they had rumours, and I believe that they had told me it had been a stabbing.
We knew something had gone wrong. It became knowledgeable that somebody actually had died. We didn't know what they'd died of, how they'd died. We just knew somebody had been found dead at the diner.
I went back inside and I just gathered a few of the locals together and said, I've got to tell you something, Mr. B's been murdered, you know, he's dead. It's horrendous, it was, you know. God, I've never heard a busy pub go so quiet in all my life, never. This sort of thing doesn't happen in our little village, you know. I think it really shook the village to the core, you know, everybody, it just couldn't believe it had happened, a murder in our village, like, you know, no.
It was almost eerily quiet in the pub. People were taken aback. They were a bit shaken about it. So we chose to just close the doors, lock up, double check the locks. The shock in the community meant that people were more, they wanted to be at home. They wanted to be secure and safe. I also think they were just shocked and saddened at the death of Mr. B, and kind of sitting in a pub doesn't quite sit right when someone's lost their life the way he did.
Following the stabbing at Satnam Singh Blugher's diner, detectives from West Mercia Police are trying to find witnesses and potential suspects.
The priority of the police, of course, in that golden hour is to collect any evidence that might lead them to whoever was responsible. So they were looking for weapons, for knives, anything that they could get DNA off, or fingerprints to prove who the killer might be. They would make inquiries to see who was in the scene at the time and whether they were still there or they'd left.
Meanwhile, detectives question Mr. B's son Harry about his father's last movements.
Inquiries were being made in the background in order for me to satisfy myself that Harry wasn't involved. We were able to do that very quickly, and we were then sought to sort of build up that picture around Satnam's life in the last 24 hours.
I remember sitting there with the inspector, and it was just everything came out.
Police learn all's not been well behind the scenes at the much-loved diner.
Mr. B was known as a bit of a Gordon Ramsay, I think, because he was a no-nonsense person. People might have described him as being harsh. He liked the job to be done and done in a particular way.
Because he was hard-working, he also had high standards, and at times he wasn't afraid to let people know when he thought that they weren't meeting his high standards.
There'd been a couple of fallings outs with some of the staff. Someone had had too much to drink and things had got out of hand.
No one seems to know what that was about, but the end result was there was some kind of violence and tables and chairs got broken in the diner. To this day, I don't think his son Harry ever got to the bottom of that, but it left him quite concerned about the types of people that Mr. B would sometimes employ.
Some of these staff were struggling immigrants, just as Mr. B once was.
To show you the measure of the kind of man that he was, from time to time he offered work to people who came from the same part of India that he came from Punjab, and from time to time he would offer them accommodation. So he lived at the diner, and he also had rooms where staff could stay.
His phone would go off. Brother, I've been here X amount of time. I really need a job. Can you help me out? He'd come over as an immigrant himself. He was always looking for someone to rescue, and maybe he's seen a bit of himself in these people, and that's why he employed them when he did.
But Harry didn't see eye to eye with his dad.
My argument was there's no background checks. You can't obtain a reference, and you're employing people that you don't know nothing about, and you guys are all living under one roof together. And I would say to my wife, one day something's going to happen, I just can't explain it. I knew something was going to go south.
Soon, detectives learn of a sinister event. Just the day before Mr. B's found dead.
A local customer had been in the diner on the Sunday and overheard an argument coming from the back around the kitchen area, and this witness told the police that he couldn't understand the language, but they realised it was an Asian language and realised that there was a loud, raised voices, a row between two people.
By now, police have identified the two missing staff who work in Mr. B's kitchen and live above the diner. 58-year-old Belkar Singh and 30-year-old Ram G, otherwise known as Romy, who police immediately home in on.
He was young, he was fit, he was strong, and on the face of it, given the number of injuries sustained by Mr. B, it looked likely that he might be the candidate for the murder.
But Mr. B's killing is shocking news to Romy.
My friend, he ringed me and he said, this happened, Mr. B is, his body is in kitchen and he died, And I'm shaking all on that time, I remember. So my all is shaking, I'm shaking, panic, I just, how can I tell you? He is good boss. He's treat me like grandkids.
Romy returns to Halfway House, where he's questioned by police.
And he take my all statement around 4 hours, He take my all clothes, my phone, everything, I still remember. And next day, he take me in the police station, and over there I gave all statement, whatever.
Romy, though, has a cast iron alibi for his whereabouts in the last 24 hours.
With Romy, it was really easy to identify where he was. He was very open in his account with us, told us that he'd gone to Leicestershire for a music concert. We could quite easily corroborate that account through financial and through intelligence inquiries.
It became clearer every minute to the police that Romy simply couldn't have done it. The one person who was missing and unaccounted for was Belkar Singh.
Another staff member reveals more to police about Belkar Singh's movements on Sunday the 25th of June, the day before the body was found.
We know from the female worker that Romy had left about 20 to 3. She'd finished her duties just before 9 p.m. and then left. So she was able to tell us that Belkar Singh was left alone at 9 p.m. with Mr. B.
She'd seen Mr. B cashing up. He then waved her goodbye, and she said to him, "Have a lovely day off with your granddaughters." She was the last person, apart from Belkar Singh, who had seen him alive.
So detectives seized the diner's CCTV, putting Belkar Singh's every step under the microscope.
From reviewing the CCTV, we could see that just before 5:20 in the morning, Belkar goes towards the skips and he appears to deposit something in there. And then within 5 minutes, the refuse company is turning up and emptying the skips. That sort of starts to get, adds to my suspicions. And then we know at 6 o'clock he's getting into a taxi and he's dragging behind him a huge suitcase.
Police need to urgently identify what Belkar Singh disposed of and why the worker who rarely leaves the diner is making such a hasty escape.
All roads seemed to be leading to Belkar Singh. He was someone whose whole life revolved around that restaurant, and for him to just disappear like that was deeply suspicious.
Belkar Singh was nominated by myself as a suspect on the night of Monday the 26th of June. Therefore, we're then starting to focus down onto him in order to locate him, in order to try and establish why he's disappeared.
By a process of elimination, the spotlight fell on Belkar Singh, and now that he'd gone, the hunt started for him.
Halfway House, Shropshire. Restaurant owner 67-year-old Satnam Singh Blugher, known locally as Mr. B, has been found brutally stabbed in the kitchen of his diner.
There were in the region of 65 wounds inflicted to Mr. B by the means of a sharp-edged weapon. I just cannot understand what would go through someone's head who'd want to inflict that level of injury on somebody.
A manhunt is underway for Mr. B's employee, Belkar Singh, who's mysteriously disappeared hours before the body was found.
There was no apparent reason for Belkar to get into a taxi at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Monday on his day off.
But suddenly contact is made with the prime suspect himself by his fellow kitchen worker, Romy.
Given that Belkar Singh had disappeared literally into the night without a trace, everyone was concerned to know where he'd gone. Romy made a call to him.
I tried to ring few times and he not answer. And finally around 7 o'clock he answered.
During the phone conversation between Romy and Belkar, Romy discloses that Mr. B is dead.
He said, "Really? This is his reaction, that's it."
He didn't express any surprise to Romy, which immediately started to raise some concerns with Romy and his partner, and she took the decision to actually record the phone conversation.
Singh also makes dubious claims about Mr. B's movements the night before, the last time he was seen alive with the suspect.
He said to me, "Mr. B is going pub night time and he eat food and then he sleep. Mr. Singh lying, Mr. B going to pub, blah blah blah. We normally just going Monday because Monday we have day off. Mr. B never ever going pub without me.
He's given an account which doesn't really tie in with what we know around what Mr. B would do. He's saying that Mr. B went to the pub on a Sunday. That didn't happen. Mr. B would go to the pub on a Monday. So we're starting to doubt the accuracy of what Belcar is telling people.
He was very cunning. He'd always tell you half the story. Even on his day off, where are you going today? If he was going north, he'd tell you he's going south. And you couldn't trust him. So obviously, all of my attention and all my suspicion went to him. That could be the only person that was with my father that night.
As police work round the clock to hunt down their suspect, they manage to trace the taxi that picked Singh up, with a large suitcase.
From a subsequent statement given by the taxi driver, Mr. Singh was dropped off at Hilltop at West Bromwich, many miles away from Halfway House. The taxi driver recalls that he went to the bus stop. He noticed that he was looking at the timetables, and the taxi driver drove off, returned to Shropshire, leaving him there.
So we're then trying to utilise the CCTV cameras to track his movements. And from there we can see that he's gone into the shop and he's bought a top-up for his mobile phone. And there are other CCTV opportunities that allow us to track him onto a bus. And from there we were able to establish that he's gone towards the Handsworth area.
Mr. Singh had got family and friends in the Handsworth area of Birmingham. It wouldn't have taken them very long at all to track Mr. Singh.
We know that Belcar had a phone with him and that we were able to track the mobile phone. Officers are dispatched, and we're fortunate that on the Tuesday morning we're able to identify Belcar leaving an address in the Handsworth area, and we follow him for a short distance where he's arrested then on the street.
The police then went into the address, and there they found that big suitcase which had a padlock on it.
The suitcase is locked. We force entry to the suitcase.
Inside that suitcase was nearly £50,000 in cash, along with gold and jewellery, all of which had belonged to Mr. B. It was clear to them that this was a murder that had been motivated by greed.
More incriminating evidence is seized from Belcar Singh, including Mr. B's mobile phone and some keys.
Thankfully, the keys in his possession, not only are they the keys to the diner, not only are they the keys to Mr. B's private residence, but there's also keys to the locks on the suitcase. To me, I'm starting to feel reassured that we've got the right man, and we're starting to build up that evidential picture to show his involvement.
All of these turned out to be critical pieces of evidence in the case that the police were building against him.
Without delay, Singh is taken in for questioning.
During his period in custody, Belcar was pulling out all the tricks in order to delay being interviewed. Whether this was just to try and give him a little bit of thinking time, or whether he thought that we would just go away, I don't know. But he started complaining that his brain wouldn't work if he was questioned for more than 30 minutes. He was saying that his eyes were hurting and he had to go and see an eye specialist. So we had to get him sent off to the local eye hospital for an examination. When he came back, he started to complain about the food. There wasn't enough. So he was given 2 portions of curry. Then he complained there wasn't sufficient chicken in the curry.
Whilst police deal with an awkward interviewee, rumours that the suspected killer has been arrested spread back to Halfway House. It's welcome news for Romy, who was once in the frame.
Then I a little bit relax because I live local over there, and everyone is think about me because I'm a young person, and everyone think maybe I do those things,
When I saw the fact that it was Mr. Singh, I was quite shocked and saddened that someone that Mr. B had trusted had chosen to do that to him.
It was a relief that they found somebody, and I think if I remember even myself thinking, really? Really? How did he do that? And why?
Back at the police station, Belkar Singh finally breaks his silence.
He starts to overplay some of his medical complaints. We know he's described as being partially sighted, but I believe he starts the game now of trying to overplay those vulnerabilities in an effort to say, look at me, I'm a frail old man, I couldn't possibly have committed this offence. I've learned over the years that people will try and do anything to get out of admitted to their guilt, especially of an offence of such as this magnitude.
Under pressure, the suspect gives his version of events.
So initially, Belkar says that just before closing up time, he decides that he's going to go upstairs, he's going to have something to eat, which he does in his room, and then he goes to bed about 10:30 that night. He doesn't see Mr. B again. He gets up and he gets into the taxi at 6 o'clock to travel across to West Brom. He denies any knowledge of the murder of Mr. B.
So detectives press Singh about a blood-stained diner receipt, Mr. B's phone, jewellery, and £50,000 in cash that are all found in his suitcase.
Whilst he admitted that the case belonged to him, he was unable to give any account or any explanation for the items that were located within it, the items which we believe had been stolen from Mr. B.
3 days after Singh's arrest and questioning, DCI Mark Bellamy and his team are on the cusp of nailing their prime suspect.
We've recovered 2 bloodied knives from a cupboard within the kitchen at the diner. We've conducted a Home Office post-mortem on Mr. B, which says that he'd suffered a number of injuries inflicted on him by a bladed weapon. We have the fact that CCTV doesn't show anybody else entering that diner. The items of property recovered from the suitcase have now been identified by Harry that they were his father's possessions. So with that, I believe that we've got sufficient at this moment in time to go to CPS for a threshold charging decision. And thankfully they were of the same mind and gave us the authority to charge Belkar Singh with the murder of Satnam.
But the hard graft for the investigators is only just beginning.
Getting him arrested and getting him charged is probably only the start of the investigation. We're now tasked with building a thorough and complete investigation in order that we can convince the jury beyond all reasonable doubt that the person in the dock has actually committed this offence.
In Shrewsbury, Shropshire, kitchen worker Belkar Singh has been charged with the murder of his boss, known as Mr. B. As police build their case for the forthcoming trial, the lab has been testing a T-shirt that was found at the diner.
On the neckline of that T-shirt was found DNA attributed to Belkar Singh.
But importantly for us, we've got airborne blood from Mr. B on the T-shirt, which shows that that T-shirt was in close contact to Mr. B when he was struck, and wet blood went through the air and landed on the T-shirt.
The police concluded that this was in fact Belkar Singh's T-shirt that he had forgotten to get rid of. It was a highly incriminating piece of evidence.
But there's something even more compelling linking Belkar Singh to the murder scene.
There's a Lonsdale trainer footwear mark within the blood. Now we're told by at least 2 witnesses that Belkar Singh wore Lonsdale trainers. We never found any Lonsdale trainers, and it's my view that at 5:13 when he's going to the skip, he is depositing his Lonsdale trainers into the skip, and they're subsequently taken away by the refuse company. So, unfortunately, we never recovered those.
As cunning as he was, Mr. Singh knew that the bins were collected on a Monday at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning.
Belkar Singh denied that he ever wore them. He said he wore some Skechers.
It was those shoes that would be the downfall of Mr. Singh.
Not only have we got witnesses telling us that he wears Lonsdale trainers, but we've also got him on CCTV on the Sunday, going into the post office earlier in that day, and he's wearing Lonsdale trainers. So he's lying.
And Singh's Lonsdale trainers would provide police with the final piece of the forensic jigsaw.
They identified some footwear marks leading away from the blood pool towards 2 kitchen cupboards. When they opened up the kitchen cupboard, located within there were 2 knives. We were able to establish that Mr. B's blood was on the handle and on the blade of one of those knives.
Barely 6 months after Mr. B's horrific killing, Belkar Singh is brought before Stafford Crown Court, accused of murder.
Mr. Singh denied all responsibility and had pleaded not guilty, and now had to face a jury with the evidence.
The prosecution sets out its case. Belkar Singh is portrayed as a man in debt, on edge as he's long overstayed his work visa. The murder of Mr. B is his way out of his predicament.
The prosecution explained that it was planned by Belkar Singh, although appearing quite frail and unassuming, had somehow, out of some jealousy, planned to kill Mr. B for his life savings.
We know that he was sending money back home, and therefore there was a motive now around finances.
It all suggested that this was a crime that had been motivated by naked greed. He was a poor man. He was trying to keep his family in India back home. He decided that the only way to get his hands on all that cash was to dispatch Mr. B, but he did it in the most extraordinarily brutal fashion.
Knowing he'd be left alone with Mr. B on the night of Sunday the 25th of June, Singh seized his moment to pounce on his victim.
The belief was that he'd been hit over the head with a metal pan in order to daze him before he was stabbed. He was attacked with at least 3 different knives, including a meat cleaver. It was clear that he'd been on the receiving end of a frenzied and brutal attack.
Having carried out this terrible attack on Mr. B, Belkar Singh's had the forethought to rifle through his trousers and remove the takings from the till receipt and the keys from his trouser pocket, which then enables him to go upstairs into Mr. B's private room and gain access to it, and therefore take the jewellery and the remainder of the cash.
While my dad was lying there in the kitchen with all his injuries, for all I know, he probably got himself a few hours kip before he got up and left the next morning. The state of mind to do that baffles me. Absolutely baffles me.
Now it's the turn of Belkar Singh's defence.
We were faced with a mountain of evidence. It's difficult representing someone in those circumstances, but it's important that everyone who stands trial in one of our courts has a fair trial and has someone representing them who is going to do the best job that they can. In presenting Belkar Singh's case to the jury, we emphasised the fact that he was so small and with such terrible eyesight, all of which was documented by his optometrist, that he couldn't be the sort of person who would commit this crime. He moved very slowly. Witnesses who worked with him said that he was like a sloth. The jury were clearly puzzled by all of this.
And when Singh is asked to take to the stand, he makes the most of his moment.
When he would walk over to give his statement, he'd make sure that his steps were small, calculated, maybe bump into a table on the way. Mr. Singh was very clever in front of the jury to maintain the act.
Faced with the forensic evidence placing him at the murder scene, Singh changes the story he first gave detectives.
It became impossible for Belkar Singh to maintain his story that he hadn't seen the killing or been part of it. And so he made up a new one. He told the court when he gave evidence that in fact what had happened that night was that he had been in the kitchen with Mr. B when two intruders had come through the side door.
They came in through a door that wasn't covered by the CCTV, and they started to have an argument with Mr. B. This was an argument over an old business transaction which resulted in them attacking Mr. B and killing him with knives.
He tried to intervene, but he couldn't. Once the violence had ended, they took him upstairs, frog-marched him to Mr. B's bedroom, and then ransacked his room. The jewellery, the gold, the cash, everything was stuffed into a suitcase.
And this is where it gets slightly fanciful, is that they tell Belkar Singh, we know where you live, we know where your family are in India, you're going to take all this money away from the diner, and at some stage we'll catch up with you later and you can give us the money.
It was an extraordinary story, but it was the only one that he could come up with.
The prosecution, though, is having none of it.
The question was put to him if these fictional characters that had come into the diner, why were their footprints never found? To which he spinned another yarn and come up with a very unbelievable story.
They had taken their shoes off to go upstairs. Well, they're really considerate murderers now, aren't they? That they don't want to get blood on the carpet of Mr. B's upstairs apartment. It was incredulous.
After weeks of high, intense court drama, the jury retires to consider their verdict.
It was a very lonely place to be. Day after day, we would sit there waiting for a decision, and there was still no verdict. Thinking, when is this all going to end?
A real emotional roller coaster. And the moment that when the jury returns, well, that's where my head and my stomach are absolutely turning, if I'm honest.
The tension was extraordinary. No one knew what the outcome would be until the foreman stood up and said the word, guilty.
Finally found guilty, and we could draw a line underneath it.
The jury comes to the rightful conclusion, and it's an immense sense of relief.
Belkar Singh is sentenced to life, with a minimum of 27 years.
I remember when the sentence was read out, Mr. Singh just dropping to his knees. And it was some satisfaction in the devastation that I'd seen in him. The only people that are left suffering are the immediate family that have gone through it, and that never ever leaves you. It never ever leaves you.
Harry has since sold his father's beloved diner.
I still dream of my dad. He's running around in the diner, serving customers. When you lose that one person that treats you like the center of their universe, and then one day it's gone, you never really come to terms with it, but you have to live with it, I suppose.
One of the girls said, has anyone seen Abu? And I remember thinking at first that, she's just had a baby. Sometimes you do just want to get away from the world and just go for a walk.
I don't think she took a purse or handbag, so she's got no financial means of support. We've just got a young woman who has disappeared into the night.
Within 2 hours, something just didn't feel right.
And I'm reporting from Barnsley this afternoon, following the discovery of a body.
I remember just thinking, no, because this doesn't happen in our town, and it doesn't happen to a girl like her. She's too nice. Surely it has to be some kind of like sick prank.
It just got worse and worse, like each little bit of extra information that come out of it.
Was he trying to force himself on her sexually and she was rebuffing him? And that brought his rage to the fore? I don't know. But what I do know is the story he gave was wrong, it was false, and it was given to hide the real truth.
Nestled at the edge of West Yorkshire sits the tight-knit community of Castleford.
Castleford is very generation-based. Like, I can trace back my family to 200 years living in Castleford. So we do tend to stick to those roots.
I'd describe Castleford as a brilliant place to live. There's certain parts of Castleford, if you set yourself up at a high point, you can see for miles. Yeah, you can see all the way over to Leeds, and you can see all the way to Emley Moor. Yeah, you're just in the heart of England, I guess. It's a lovely place to be and feel safe around, actually. Yeah.
Probably what it's known for most famously is Castleford Tigers, the rugby league team in the Super League.
So a typical newspaper headline for Castleford would probably be something like "Police make arrest as person hit by car," but something that can happen in any place at any time.
In terms of sort of crime, don't hear a lot, from the Castleford area.
The safe neighbourhood is the perfect place to raise a family, and it's where 29-year-old schoolteacher Abby Fisher grew up.
Abby's parents were foster parents, so she had a lot of people coming in and out of the home, but it was a very tight family, very loving, very caring. I was 11 years old when I first met Abby. There was a small group of us that kind of latched onto each other because we were all very quiet, very shy, and then once we got to know each other, we were like thick as thieves, really. Abby was very, very well behaved, probably because of her wanting to be a teacher when she grew up. No one had a negative word to say about her. She was absolutely lovely.
While still at school, Abby met her future husband, Matthew.
When Abby first told me that she had a bit of a crush on Matthew, I had a bit of a laugh. I'm like, oh, really? It's more like to me, more of a bit too quiet, but I was like, are you sure? She's like, oh yeah, I really, really like him. And I'm like, oh, bless you, bless your heart. So they got into a relationship towards the back end of year 11, so we were about 14, 15, that kind of age. And I can't actually remember a moment where we was like, right, we're together now. It just seemed to just gradually happen, and it just faded in, and we just knew that they were together, really. He was quiet, he was very polite, very generous and very caring. Much like Abby, if you wanted help, he would gladly give it to you. And I think that's what's the main thing that drew them together. Even teachers commented on the fact that, they're together because they used to, walk around school holding hands and things like that. And to be fair, when you're at school, relationships, you just think, they're not going to last long. But there's just something about how they're connected that just seemed, you thought that that's a relationship that's just going to last. Abby's parents absolutely loved Matthew. They considered him to be kind of like a bit of a son, a surrogate son to him.
Matt and Abby's relationship continued to flourish through school and college. And when Abby fulfilled her dream of becoming a primary school teacher, Matt was by her side.
Abby's always expressed that she wanted to be a teacher. She was very academically driven, and she always said that she wanted to help, especially the younger children. She knuckled down and focused on getting a career done.
Everything was falling into place for the couple, and so taking the next step in their relationship seemed inevitable.
Abby and Matt got engaged in 2012, and then by 2017 they were married. Abby was very much your typical white wedding, your traditional white wedding kind of girl. But I remember her big dream was to get married on like this big cruise ship, and that's why she got married. Abby's parents couldn't have wished for a better man to look after their daughter.
Life was good for Abby. Married to her high school sweetheart and having landed her dream job, there was just one thing left to make their lives complete.
I think Abby's knew very early on that she wanted a family. She was very family orientated. I think that is because of her upbringing, where she was used to a lot of children being around. And I remember having a discussion with her, and she was saying, I can't wait to be a mum. It's the one thing that I want in this world. She says, if nothing else, that's what I want.
But Abby and Matt struggled to conceive and make the difficult decision to start IVF.
While Abby was going through IVF, it's a very intrusive procedure, and she was that determined and that focused to have a child that she kind of blocked everything else out. It's very nasty kind of injections and things like that. So I don't know how she did it, but she was determined she was going to do it. We all kind of bubble wrapped her a little bit, because I do know it's a treatment that can be very mentally exhausting as well as physically exhausting.
But the treatment is ultimately successful, and on their third round of IVF, Abby falls pregnant with the child she has longed for.
She was absolutely ecstatic. She was nearly bursting into tears. She was just like, I can't wait, it's just so exciting. With Matthew, he was very focused on Abby. From what I'd seen on Facebook and what Abby had said, that he were absolutely over the moon. Nervous, as all first-time parents are, but he was very excited to become a dad.
When their baby daughter arrives, Abby is elated.
Everyone was just so absolutely amazed because she was one of those women that you could tell she was just a natural born mum. Seeing how excited she was to be a mum. I remember her messaging me saying, this sleep regression's a pain and stuff like that. Like, any advice on how to get her to sleep through at night and stuff like that. But then she'd be posting all over Facebook, first time that she'd eaten more of a solid food and stuff like that.
Matt and Abby embrace parenthood and soon start to take their daughter to local parent and baby classes.
I was sat usually at the opposite side of the hall to Abby. She just looked absolutely besotted with a little girl and just really, really happy. I take my hats off to anybody that's out and about with a new baby. Just to get out the door at first is a massive challenge. You're sleep deprived and the checklist of things that you've got to do before you leave the house, it's a big thing. So they looked like they were just settling into parenthood like we all do. They just came across as just kind of new parents enjoying the journey. Each time I saw Abby, she was at a class with her husband as a family unit. They looked so happy together and they were filming the daughter. It's a lovely memory to snap on your iPhone and play back. Yeah, I could see them doing that over and over again.
Once you've had a baby, your relationship with your partner kind of does get put to one side because you are fully focused on looking after this little baby that can't look after itself. But I know that for a fact that they were very doting parents and they were very focused on bringing her up.
But just days after Matt and Abby celebrate their daughter's christening, friends and family get some worrying news.
I remember reading on Matt's Facebook something along the lines of, has anyone seen Abby? If you have, can you contact me?
Matt not only posts online to alert friends and family, he also informs police of Abby's disappearance.
Matthew said that he woke up on the morning the 9th, the baby daughter was next to him in bed and that Abby was missing.
And I remember at first not really worrying about it because I thought, she's a first-time mum going through IVF. It's a very, stressful thing being a new parent. And I just thought that maybe she just wants to get out, go for a walk, kind of like clear her head and things like that.
There are quite regular missing from home reports. Most are very short term and most have an explanation behind them. Some of the common reasons that people go missing is relationship breakdowns, husband and wife, fallouts, debt. These are probably among the most common reasons why people will go missing, and most are found very quickly and have not come to any harm. But that's not always the case.
In the West Yorkshire town of Castleford, new mum Abby Fisher has been reported missing by husband Matt. As friends worry that the pressure of caring for a newborn is taking its toll on Abby, concerning details of her disappearance emerge.
Matthew said that he woke up on the morning the 9th, the baby daughter was next to him in bed, and that Abby was missing. So that raises the suspicion level straight away. And why would she leave a baby daughter? To Abby particularly, this was a precious birth. It's a very, very difficult treatment to go through his IVF, and I would have been suspicious that she'd left a daughter. I wouldn't have expected a mother to act like that.
I remember once the news broke that Abby had gone missing, within a couple of hours we just sensed that something wasn't quite right.
We first heard about the missing person appeal for Abby through West Yorkshire Police. Matthew told police when he reported Abby as a missing person that Abby had gone and that she hadn't taken her car, and that she also hadn't taken her phone as well.
I don't think she took her purse or handbag, so she's got no financial means of support. The red flags are waving, they're blowing in the wind by this stage for me.
One of the things that kind of got me a little bit suspicious was the fact that Abby did not go anywhere without a phone. She typically had a phone glued to her at all times, and also the fact that she had an inhaler and her inhaler was left behind, and she was obviously very conscious that if I'm going to go for a walk I need my inhaler just in case anything triggers.
Once you've established that there has been no contact with family or friends, then you're thinking, this doesn't seem right.
So Abby Fisher is a school teacher. She's a mum to a young child, 6-month-old baby girl. And ultimately she's a wife as well, a family person, very close to her family, her mum and dad. And from what we've heard about the family, they had a really close bond.
You would have expected she'd have contacted her parents. She's very close to her parents, but no contact there.
As the community becomes increasingly alarmed, friends and family organise a search party alongside police.
Originally, it was our little friend group that was saying, right, who's free, is anyone available? We'll just walk the usual routes where Abby goes. And one of our other friends set up a Facebook group and tagged Abby's Facebook and Matt's Facebook. And we were sharing it everywhere saying, listen, if anyone's free, do you mind, these are the routes that we know Abby typically likes to walk on. And everyone, even if they didn't know who she was, there were strangers that were saying, we're free, we're going to come and help you find her.
My first way of knowing about it was from social media. There was a post on there about people meeting up to try and search for Abby, and there was a picture of her. And straight away I recognised her face. So that was taking place on the Saturday in the town centre of Castleford. People were trying to use their best efforts to find him. Everything went viral basically in more of a way than I've ever seen anything kick off before, because the whole community wanted to find her, and obviously such a respected teacher and well-loved friend, mum. It was just, I could see that it was already attracting massive attention. It got a lot of people, and obviously the police were involved.
And then we of course heard about teachers from the school who were out looking for Abby. There were night searches for Abby, people using their phone torches to try and find any trace of her and where she could be.
And trying to sort of think of ways that we could help find her, places that might not have been checked. Her house wasn't far from the river, so it crossed my mind, could a body be in that river, because it's literally like a stone's throw from where she lived. We'd had an absolute massive heat wave that weekend. So I remember being in our back garden, temperatures, I think they'd got up to 38, 40, round about And he was thinking, if somebody's missing this time, how are they going to be surviving with all, like, fluids? And we're just thinking, you know, where is she? We're all struggling with this sweltering heat. I wonder where she is. Wonder if she's getting a drink. Wonder if, you know, if somebody's having some sort of mental breakdown or, you know, a really bad episode. How is it, you know, have they got access to basics, or have they got some comfort, or whereabouts could she be?
As the search for missing Abby continues, Matt and Abby's family are doing their best to support one another.
Matthew is sitting with Abby's parents at their home, just listening for news, because they don't know what's happened.
As Abby's family wait, Matt raises a chilling possibility to her parents.
And we know that Matthew as well, once he'd called Abby's parents to their home, he actually joined Abby's father on a search for Abby herself. At that point, Matthew told Abby's father that she'd been considering taking her own life.
That's a possibility which could never be discounted.
I think everybody was going along the lines of possibly postnatal depression, because it's so soon after having a newborn child, but it just didn't sort of make sense at all, because you could see how in love they were with the little girl, and she didn't have the demeanour of somebody that looked, I'd say, depressed, or that looked like they were really, really struggling. It was not somebody that you'd think could just take herself away in the middle of the night and sort of commit suicide, which is kind of what everybody was thinking, I think.
As fears for Abby's safety grow, so do concerns for her husband, Matt.
We were concerned for his welfare as well, because if your wife has gone out of the home and possibly taken their own life or missing, how would that make the remaining parent feel left with child on your own? So from our perspective, we want to know that the little baby was all right and that he was doing all right.
As the community rallies, the news everyone has been dreading comes from the police, who had been searching undergrowth adjacent to a lay-by in Brierley, South Yorkshire.
We just know that police found Abby's body partially covered in bushes.
I remember just sitting for a while and just thinking, no, because this doesn't happen, especially in our town, and it doesn't happen to a girl like her. She's too nice. Surely there's something. It has to be some kind of like sick prank, but yeah, it definitely hit. And that night, I didn't even sleep that night. I was just up crying constantly.
I remember opening my phone and seeing what had happened. It made me feel absolutely sick. You just couldn't take it in. We all found it horrific, not just how she'd been killed, but the fact that her body had been dumped like half an hour away in some woodland. I didn't even want to go in that area or even think of driving anywhere near there at that point. And then the more you were reading about it, the more looking at what had happened, it's like each little bit of extra information that come out of it, it just got worse and worse.
We now, no doubt, we have got a murder.
Hi, I'm Claire Lewis from The Star, and I'm reporting from Barnsley this afternoon, following the discovery of a body in the Brierley area of the town yesterday. Although formal identification is yet to take place, police believe the body to be that of 29-year-old Abby Fisher.
Just 48 hours after having been reported missing, the body of new mum Abby Fisher has been found 12 miles from her home.
The body was discovered in undergrowth in a wooded area off Southmore Road. Police want to hear from anybody who saw anything suspicious, particularly motorists who may have dashcam footage.
We know that Abby was killed at some point between July 8th and July 9th. There were quite serious marks on her neck, which were typical of being strangled, and there were also defence injuries as well to the rest of her body, so her arms, her legs, and also her stomach as well.
But as Abby's friends and family reel from the news of her death, They are horrified when within 24 hours, police make an arrest.
I remember when our friend told our group that Matthew had been arrested. I felt sick.
You want to cry, you want to be sick, you want to just not believe it's happened, basically. It takes you a while to sort of reread it, register it again, and it just don't sink in whatsoever.
I remember once I told my partner at the time that Abby had gone missing. The first thing he said to me, he just said, listen, I don't want to sound horrible, but they do say that if someone goes missing completely out of the blue, the first person you look at is the partner.
Since her disappearance 3 days earlier, West Yorkshire police have been working diligently to piece together the events surrounding Abby's death.
They realised quite early on that things weren't right. And Matthew had come into the centre of the frame as a suspect.
It all started to unravel on the movement of Matthew Fisher's car.
I know they very quickly got onto the CCTV, and he's on the major routes in Castleford. And at a time when he said he was actually in bed, his car was spotted leaving Castleford.
So we know that Abby was reported as a missing person to West Yorkshire Police after 10 a.m. on July 9th. But what we now know is that Matthew had set off from his home at 4 o'clock on July 9th in his car. He travelled first to Lancashire, then we think through Derbyshire and then to South Yorkshire.
So now we're thinking, what's he doing? One of the sites which he obviously stopped at was near Brayley in South Yorkshire, and it was there they found a body at the side of the road in a ditch.
Police believe that in the early hours of the morning, Matt Fisher left the family home with his dead wife's body in the car, finally stopping in an area familiar to him.
He's driven round on this route through, these various different counties, Lancashire, Derbyshire, South Yorkshire, presumably looking for a site to dispose of the body. And he ends up at a place in Brayley in an area which apparently he used to play there when he was a kid.
So perhaps there was some sort of recollection that he had of that area, and perhaps he thought it would be an ideal spot to leave Abby's body. He knew the area, he knew where he wanted to go when he set off with Abby's body on that morning.
With Matt as their main suspect, police scrutinise the signal from his phone on the night they believe Abby was killed.
They then start looking at cell site analysis. This is where your mobile phone is turned on. And as you move about the country, your phone connects to retrieve signals from various of the cell sites across the country. And you can track people. So they tracked him, and he went for some hours on various different routes into Lancashire, from West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire. They went in quite a roundabout route. They have tracked his signal and found his wife's body. Obviously, he has lied. And it was then a matter of pulling the pieces together and presenting that evidence to him, that, he was the person who took her from the house. He was the person who had killed her, and he was the person who had actually disposed of her body.
When Matt's barrister speaks to him in custody, Matt can offer no alibi.
It's very difficult because he had no memory of what occurred.
In trying to build up their case further, detectives speak to Abby and Matt's neighbours, who reveal that they were aware of a disturbance in the early hours.
There were some reports of neighbours hearing banging from Abby Fisher's home. Neighbours had told police they'd heard what sounded like an argument.
I think there'd been a lot of noise through the walls, so obviously adjoining neighbours must have heard a lot of violence and arguments that night, which, it just don't bear thinking about, does it?
The information they get from the neighbours allows detectives to estimate when Abby was killed.
If we think that she actually died at the time that the next door neighbours heard the argument between 10:30 at midnight, probably more like midnight, and he didn't leave till 5 in the morning. He sat some time thinking about what he's going to do. Now, he's had ample time to say, OK, I'll just ring the police and say, I just had an argument, I lost it, and, you know, I'm really sorry. Now, he's made a conscious decision that he's going to try and conceal what he's done.
This timeline leads detectives to further troubling conclusions.
We do know that Matthew actually sat with the body for a number of hours before he put Abby in the boot of his car and actually left their 6-month-old daughter at home by herself while he drove from Castleford to South Yorkshire, which is not a short drive. The 6-month-old child was alone in the house for 5 hours while Abby was in the boot of Matthew's car.
And then, when detectives scrutinise Abby's online activity, they uncover more disturbing evidence.
When the police looked at Abby's internet search history, they discovered the search, why does my husband hate me? And can I get counselling on the NHS? Quite a strong term, and to actually Google it, you're thinking, what's going off in this relationship?
It was quite clear that she loved Matthew. You don't sit and Google how to save a marriage if you don't love that person and you want to make the marriage work.
With news of Matt in custody spreading, Talking Castleford turns to the message he had posted on Facebook the day Abby disappeared.
As a journalist, you report on a lot of missing people, but there are cases that begin to snowball, and this unfortunately was one of them. As soon as we knew that Matthew had been arrested, you go back to his Facebook post and you see that he's been asking the public for help in finding his wife, asking people to ring him if they'd seen her.
And at the time, I remember reading it, part of my brain was kind of that sounds a little bit tone deaf. Like, if it wasn't like my partner, I'd put a little bit more emotion into it, but that's the last, you know, you put that back in, you're like, oh no, it's stress, you know, don't blame him kind of thing.
And we're just all been like sent on a wild goose chase basically, because like it said my wife's disappeared and put all this stuff on Facebook trying to cover up what had been done.
The community start to question Matt's behaviour in the time since he reported Abby missing.
Matthew's sat at home with Abby's parents watching the news. He knows what's happened, so he has got to act normally as best he can, because, you know, he's come up with some sort of plan which he hopes to get away with. So he just carries on as normal as he can be at that moment. He knows what he's done, and he just hopefully he's going to get away with it. But of course, the discovery of Abby's body would change things, because then there will be evidence potentially to connect back to Matthew and to the home. And he's just acting normally as if she's a genuine missing person and he is concerned.
Matthew himself actually went on a walk with Abby's dad as a sort of way of trying to find Abby. Obviously Abby's parents were concerned for her, and Matthew joined in that search, and obviously that was just an attempt to cover up what he'd done. Matthew told Abby's father that she'd been considering taking her own life. So he's here trying to plant these little seeds of doubt and ultimately trying to cover his own tracks.
All that I could keep thinking was, I was sat in that room with a murderer. Like, he was sat at the other side of the room. How on earth?
And then, in an unexpected development, just hours after his arrest, Matt starts to speak.
He accepted that he must have committed the offence, and it was on that basis that he pleaded guilty to it. But he couldn't remember doing it.
And as the gravity of the situation sinks in, Matt's memory begins to return.
Matthew Fisher told the psychiatrist that he'd smothered Abby after snapping after an argument that the pair had had, which centred around Abby saying that she was likely to return to her parents' home to live with her parents, and also it centred around Abby returning back to work as a school teacher. And she'd told Matthew that she was ready to go back to work, she felt like she needed to go back to work, and it sounded like Matthew didn't like that. He wanted Abby to be at home with him ultimately. And obviously Matthew took some sort of issue with that. and snapped and ultimately killed his wife.
But as Matt fleshes out his confession in custody, cracks in his account of events begin to show.
What you're saying does not fit the facts at all. She suffered major trauma. Given the circumstances and what the neighbours said, that there was a disturbance, there's more things happening here than he's actually admitted.
"30-year-old father of one, Matt Fisher, formally pleads guilty to the murder of his wife Abby. But in court, the inconsistencies in his story become glaring.
Because his answers don't actually fit in with the forensic and pathological evidence.
Matthew told the psychiatrist that he'd snapped and smothered Abby, but the prosecution outlined that that didn't really explain the injuries that Abby herself had suffered. There were quite serious marks on her neck, which were typical of being strangled.
He said that he smothered her with her t-shirt, which was not confirmed by the forensic evidence of the pathologist, who said manual strangulation was the cause of death. You would not have got the injuries to her neck by smothering her with a t-shirt.
Many of Abby's injuries suggest that Matt's account of events may not be true.
She had a lot of soft tissue and blunt trauma injuries, and he gave an explanation to say, one, that she'd fallen down the stairs. Well, given that he's already previously lied about other things, take that with a pinch of salt.
The truth is far more sinister.
There were also defence injuries as well to the rest of her body, so her arms, her legs, and also her stomach as well. So the judge actually said that Matthew had, from what it sounded like, submitted Abby to quite a serious assault and ultimately killed her in the family home.
But with Matt's guilty plea, he is not obliged to explain.
Because I suspect he would know that if he went for diminished responsibility, temporal insanity, then he would have to answer those difficult questions that he didn't want to answer, which is, why did you say you smothered her when you strangled her? And why has she got all these injuries? Why say she fell down the stairs when she clearly didn't? Because she's got defence injuries. You were attacking her and she was fighting back. And you then brutally placed your hands around her throat and you strangled your wife until she was dead. He don't want to answer those questions. He just wants to hide away in prison and make himself believe that he ain't as bad as he actually is.
The evidence against Matt is overwhelming.
I remember hearing that he'd wrapped her in a blanket and duct taped the blanket kind of closed and things like that.
We heard from the prosecution that police found fingerprints on gaffer tape next to Abby's body.
There was no way that he were going to deny what had happened, because they found a can beside Abby that had his DNA on it, so that he'd obviously had a drink once he'd disposed of her body, so there was no way that he could have denied it.
The prosecution's case was that this was a violent murder that ultimately Matthew would try to cover up in the early stages, because it was actually Matthew that made the missing persons call to police in the first place, told them that his wife was missing. And obviously that was just an attempt to cover up what he'd done and to try and cover his tracks. He then phoned Abby's parents, who rushed over to the house, and as he was sat with Abby's parents, Matthew Fisher started to Google West Yorkshire Police, South Yorkshire Police, and also BBC News, and the prosecution told the court that that was a clear attempt to try and find out if Abby's body had been found by the force as he was sat with their parents. So as he was playing the role of a concerned husband, he was trying to find out if what he'd done had been discovered.
Having heard all the evidence, Abby's family make the brave decision to confront Matt in court.
Matthew barely raised his head. He looked at the floor. It was Abby's parents who had the guts really to stand up and to face him and to let him know that what he had done, how it had affected them and what they were going through. And for Abby's mum to stand up and deliver the victim impact statement that she did, and also for Abby's father as well, because he stood up in court, as did her brother. It's still so raw. It's remarkable, really, the bravery that they had to have, and just how powerful it was as well, is something that stays with you. And certainly Abby's mother's victim impact statement is something that won't leave me for a while, just because of how raw and emotional it was. She broke down a number of times, but she was determined to get through it, and she had things that she wanted to say to Matthew.
You sat there and said nothing, knowing you had killed my baby girl. You dragged her through the undergrowth and dumped her in the woods where you played as a child. Everyone was desperately hoping to find our daughter, and you knew she was dead. You killed my baby girl. What the hell gave you the right to do that? Her death has changed our lives immeasurably. I've missed my daughter so much.
It was a very passionate and tearful statement that Abby's mother made, and she actually ordered him to look at her. He did briefly, and then put his eyes down and started crying. Of course, he's crying for himself, he's not crying for anybody else.
Abby's mother said that they'd taken him in as their own son for him to live with them in their own home. So we spent 5 years living with them, and Abby's mother said that he'd sat there on July 9th, pretending that he was helping the family in their search for Abby. He sat there knowing that he'd killed her baby girl. Abby's brother said that ultimately Matthew had made the world a darker place because he'd taken Abby's light away from him and away from the world as well.
With the damning evidence laid out in court and the impact statements from Abby's family heard, it is the job of Matt's barrister to offer mitigation in an effort to reduce his sentence.
The atmosphere in the courtroom was obviously very tense, with a lot of distressed people. It's never easy on a murder case, quite simply because virtually everyone in the courtroom is there for the victim rather than the defendant. And you obviously have a natural sympathy for their position as well. So when you mitigate on behalf of the defendant, you are always conscious of the family being present. The mitigation on behalf of Matthew Fisher was essentially the fact that he'd pleaded guilty at the very earliest opportunity and that he was remorseful for his actions. Matthew was very distressed by the whole proceedings.
At the court, the hearing that I went to, he didn't say anything about his regrets, his apologies, anything like that. I remember sitting there watching him and thinking, why are you not showing emotion? Like, I couldn't see a single tear at all. He didn't seem to be crying. He was more annoyed with himself. He was upset with himself for getting caught doing something rather than what he'd actually done. But I do know that if he did apologise, it wasn't something that we were going to accept off him anyway, whether he wanted to say he was sorry or not, because it's something that you can't forgive, really.
Matthew Fisher is sentenced to life for the murder of his wife Abby. He will serve a minimum term of 15 years.
So I think we can see by the number of people that have attended at court today to support Abby and her family that she was loved by many, truly loved by many, by her friends and family, by a community, but also by the teachers that she worked with and the pupils that were at school that have also been affected by this crime. The community has obviously been shocked and devastated by what Matthew Fisher did to Abby, and his actions have left Abby's daughter with neither parent, which is truly devastating. Nothing will ever be able to bring Abby back for her mother and father or any of her friends and family or the community. I do hope that the justice given today will give them small comfort. I know it is very small comfort. They would like to be given the opportunity and privacy now to grieve for Abby and to also focus on looking after Abby's daughter and all of their other grandchildren. Thank you.
I remember the only emotion I was feeling at the time was absolute rage. I remember talking to my friends and things like that. Says, I don't even feel pity for him. There's no, oh, I feel so sorry for him now that you're going to have to go sit in a prison cell, not see your child, you've lost your wife. I just remember thinking, you've done this, you deserve it.
Whatever was going off in their marriage at that moment in time when this happened, he had choices. He could have said, go stay with your mum, take the baby, and a few days and, let's talk things through. I don't know. But what I do know is the story he gave was wrong, it was false, and it was given to hide the real truth that only he knows.
We've had to fill in the blanks ourselves. We thought that maybe he was jealous of his daughter because she was getting all the love, all the attention. He was used to it just being him and Abby. So we're thinking, well, maybe has he got jealous of his own child, and is that something that triggered him and wound him up one day and he just couldn't control himself?
This is not something that happens every day. This is something that stays with people who lived on the same street, people who knew Abby as well, who joined in the search for her. This is not something that leaves a community very quickly. And Abs was a mum, daughter, sister, and ultimately this is something that any family could go through.
The reaction, obviously, in a case of this nature is it's very distressing for everyone that is involved. The family were clearly and understandably very, very distressed. It was a tragic case for all concerned.
You read about these things and you see crime documentaries and everything else, but you'd never ever believe that it could happen to somebody in your network. But people that are very close to Abby, such as daughter and a family, and that they'll never be the same again, will they?
That little girl's going to grow up and find out that her mother was murdered by her father. So he has damaged everybody's lives. Everybody's. It's just a tragedy all the ways round, and a tragedy that you just feel should never have happened. If only he'd said, okay, go to your mother's. We'll work things out later.
Her loss is definitely, it's put a massive hole in the family. The fact that they've got their grandchild left behind. The little girl, she just looks the absolute double of her mum, and she's got the personality of her already. And I think that is the only thing that's been holding them together, because they have to be strong for the daughter. I choose to focus on all the happy memories that I have with Abby. I definitely try to focus on the positive things, and a little girl's definitely got a lot of aunties that'll definitely help her to remember who her mum was.